And let's see. He's the assistant outfitting manager for Three Rivers Resort, which if you haven't seen that place, it's down kind of where a whole bunch of rivers come together, including the Gunnison and the Taylor down in Almont, Colorado. So it's a great place. They've got all kinds of lodging there. They've got some great private fishing and all kinds of public fishing there. So talk to Patrick about it beforehand or afterwards, but it's a great place to kind of get to know better. He's in charge of the fly shop, and he's also in charge of Willow Fly Anglers, which is the guide service that runs out of Three Rivers Resort. He's also basically assisting and managing all the outfitting that goes on there. So whether that's kayaking to rafting to photography, he's kind of in charge of a whole bunch of that stuff. So it's a pretty big job for a pretty young guy. So he's doing a great job with it. He's a Colorado native. He actually went to school up at Colorado Mountain College up in Leadville and ended up guiding down in the Arkansas for a number of years, and then switched over to the Western Slope in the Gunnison area about 7, 8 years ago. And he's been there with Three Rivers for that time. And he's been doing a great job. I've known Patrick for a while, and he's just a wonderful guy to get to know. He knows the waters incredibly well. Just talked to him a couple of days ago and he gave us some good advice to some folks I've got coming up there. So he's just a good guy to know from a lot of different standpoints. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome Patrick to the show.
Well, thanks, Brian. Can everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the introduction there. That pretty much wraps up my presentation. So you guys have a great night.
And if people have questions of Patrick, if you could save them till the end, but in the meantime, throw them into the chat so you don't forget and we don't miss them. And Patrick will answer questions at the end.
Shout out to George as well. He's the Zoom guru. But it's awesome to see a really active chapter. I'm actually secretary for our little TU chapter up here in Gunnison as well. It's called Gunnison Angling Society. See, on this call, we've got 34 people, and I think the most we've had on one of our Zoom meetings is probably like 10. So it's cool to see a real active chapter, and it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of good work down there. And so keep it up, and we appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get into the PowerPoint. So can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Awesome.
Good here. Looks great, Patrick.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. So yeah, just kind of an overview of our fishery here. That's kind of the goal of this presentation. We're really lucky to have a really diverse fishery. So that's kind of one of the things I always tell people is that, we have a reputation for the Taylor and the Gunnison, of course, but there's a lot going on up here, and a lot of smaller water, a lot of high lakes, reservoirs, you name it. So the goal of this presentation is just kind of showcase the diversity of the area and, hopefully provide some value to you guys. If you want to make a trip up here, or maybe even you catch a tidbit that might help you, in your home waters. So that's the goal. And I'll have a couple little shameless plugs here on our operation up here in Almont. But like George said, feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we'll try and cover everything you guys come up with here at the end. So mostly pictures too. I didn't want to do a lot of boring text. So at the least, hopefully you get some cheap entertainment out of it. But just a little bit about the shop here. So Willow Fly was founded in '83. If you guys look at this picture on the right here, you can see on the facade, 1925. So it's kind of a cool old building that we're actually based out of. Over the years, that building was a general store for a long time called Salisbury's. And it was actually the Almont Post Office for a long time as well. And it was the main office for Three Rivers Resort. And in 1983 is when a couple of guys, Rourke Kiklovich and Mark Schumacher, started Willow Fly. So we're actually one of the first outfitters in this valley. It was us and Dragonfly were the first. And so we're kind of one of the only only fully permitted outfitters in the Valley, and we are the only Orvis endorsed outfitter in the Valley too. So try and be real friendly. If any of you guys have been into our shop, we just want to have a real open atmosphere where any ability, any skill level, if you're first time fly fisher or been doing it for your whole life, we can cater to you and help you out, draw you maps, whatever you need, and get you out there. So it's a full service fly shop. We're actually open year round. And obviously most of our business comes right now, kind of 4 months out of the year, but we're here year round for you. If you want to come up and fish the Taylor and get off the South Platte in January and come freeze your butt off in Taylor Park, we can get you up there. So, and like I said, we are fully permitted. And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit because that's an important thing for those of you who like to travel and fish with different outfitters, throughout the country and stuff, to ask the outfitter, if they fish. Our area is a great example because we've got such a diverse area here, and not all the outfitters can guide just anywhere. So for instance, the Taylor, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, there's only 2 outfitters in the whole Valley that can guide you on the Taylor, and we're one of them. So it's kind of important, important to us to be able to, let our guides go wherever they think's fishing best and get you where the conditions are ideal. So we've got Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, and all that stuff. So we can kind of go wherever we need to. And that's sometimes the hardest thing in the morning, is deciding where we're going to go that day. So we're pretty lucky. I'll just tell you guys a little bit about the resort, which is Three Rivers Resort. That's the home of Willowfly anglers. So the resort actually bought Willowfly in '85. And so it's all kind of under one roof now. But Three Rivers, we've got a bunch of cabins here. I think we got about 40 cabins now, kind of range in size from real basic fishing cabin, twin bed, kitchen, and a bathroom, clear on up to 6-bedroom vacation home. So families, or whatever size group you have, it'll work for kind of anybody. So that's kind of the neat thing about it. And all the cabins have a kitchen, bathroom, grill. Got quite a few cabins along the Taylor River. So if you're staying here, you can fish our private water on the Taylor. So it's a nice place to come, and especially you guys who are anglers. But if you just want to bring your family up and poke around and do a bunch of other stuff too, we can do that as well. So there's a view from one of those river cabins looking over the Taylor. Pretty nice. Kitchen, outside of the cabin. The resort's got some cool amenities too. Got a volleyball court. We use that for casting lessons and stuff as well. Big old covered gazebo. Got a couple of those. Do weddings, family reunions, stuff like that. And then the restaurant that I eat entirely way too often. It's a smokehouse restaurant, so we smoke all our own meats and stuff. So you get off the river and go get a good pulled pork sandwich or brisket or something. It's good stuff. And there's the patio on the restaurant. So, and then of course, tons of wildlife right here in Almont proper. We're right in Taylor Canyon. So we see a lot of bighorn sheep like this ram here. You could be sitting in your hot tub along the river and see this right across the river from you. So it's kind of cool. Bring your camera up for sure. And we've got goats too in the canyon. We see those every now and then. They're pretty elusive, but when we do see one, it's nice to have somebody with a good camera around like this shot. And then we also, part of our outfitting service is whitewater rafting. We got class 3 whitewater, class 2. So it's kind of something for everybody there. We even get down and run the Lake Fork of the Gunnison when it's flowing good, and that's like a class 4 stretch. So there again, just something for everybody. Good place to bring the family, or if you just want to come and do something different, fish for a couple days and then play around on the river. Good stuff. We do guided kayaking trips look at those duckies all in a nice row there. And there's the facade of the front of the resort. So that's the shameless plug for the resort. And now it's all just fishing stuff. So our region is kind of Southwest Colorado. You can see us in the purple color there. The Gunnison River is one of the main tributaries of the Colorado. So we're on the western slope. And this next map shows you a little bit more zoomed in on the Gunnison area. So if you look at this map, you can just kind of get an idea just by looking at the blue lines of the diversity of our fishery here. And this doesn't even show it all. This is just kind of a basic map. But if you look just north of Gunnison, you'll see Almont there in red. So we're about 10 miles north of Gunnison and about 20 miles south of Crested Butte. So we're right in between. I always say if you're heading to Crested Butte, you're Almont there. You're not quite there yet. So we're right smack dab in the middle of the drainage. That's where the name Three Rivers Resort comes from. It's the Taylor, which our resort's on here, the East River, and they come together to form the Gunnison. And where I'm sitting right now is about a 3-minute walk from the confluence. So we're right at the headwaters of the Gunnison up here and right at the end of the Taylor. This next slide just kind of touches on a little bit of our reputation up here over time. A lot of you guys have probably fished the Taylor or definitely heard about it. But we're kind of known for some big fish, which is kind of neat. Our county holds a few of the state records for big fish. So rainbow out of Morrow Point, biggest brown right out of the Roaring Judy ponds, which is kind of funny if you've been there. It's like totally kids ponds, but they get some big fish in there. And then Mackinac or lake trout, a lot of big trophy Mackinac out of Blue Mesa and Taylor Reservoir. And then tiger trout, I heard you guys talking about that before the meeting started. So there's tigers in Dome too, so it's kind of cool. There's a nice rainbow from the catch and release section out of the Taylor. So, you know, a lot of people know about the catch and release, the CNR we call it. And they know about those big fish, which is awesome. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But kind of more what I wanted to focus on is there's kind of something for everybody. So, you know, again, you got the family or, you know, you want to hit some smaller water or just catch a bunch of fish. We got a pretty diverse area here. So that's what I love about this area. And, you know, our guides are real passionate about showing people kind of the other side of this area. It's not just the tailwater, of course. So I'll kind of start from the top, talk a little bit about the high alpine lakes we have, and I'll work my way down the drainage. And I won't get too specific on any one waterway here and get sidetracked, but just more to kind of give you guys an idea of what we got. But this picture you're looking at is one of our great guides, Matt Galvez. And on his anniversary every year, he gets dressed up in his tux and his wife puts on her wedding gown and they hike up to one of their favorite high alpine lakes and catch some brookies. So it's kind of special. But I just think that's a great shot where he's dressed to the nines there with his fish. So so if you guys have done any high alpine lake fishing, you know the beauty that you see. I mean, it's just unparalleled, like you can see here. Just incredible. You know, of course, a couple of things. You always want to be safe going into these high alpine areas. A lot of the hikes can be pretty strenuous. You want to have food and water with you and definitely be ready for inclement weather. I would keep checking the forecast days ahead of your trip. And if you're seeing, you know, heavy thunderstorms in the forecast, you might just make a different plan because you get up above tree line and it's not something you really want to mess with lightning and cold rain or hail or even snow. So definitely check the weather, be prepared, have your layers, have your rain jacket, all that kind of stuff. But you know, if you're up for it and you're up for the hike and you're up for getting away from the crowds, this is something to definitely look into. And I'll just keep buzzing through some of the photos here, but insane views, a lot of solitude. A busy day at one of these lakes would be another group there of 1 or 2 people. So it's a great way to get out of you know, populated areas and catch some fish. And cutthroats, we get a lot of cutthroats up there. A lot of Colorado River cutthroats. Some of those lakes have Snake River cuts and brookies, like you saw in that first slide. One thing that's kind of cool about cutthroats in high alpine lakes is that they get really colored up, like this one that you see here. And when you compare that to other species, you know, like a brown or a rainbow, or oftentimes brook trout, when they live in still water, a lot of those other species get kind of drab colored or kind of silvery. But cuts tend to even get more colored up in still waters compared to cutthroats that live in the river. So really cool, really beautiful fish. And some of these lakes have very big fish too. There's a big one. So, you know, again, I mean, you're getting away from people and you can catch big fish and get the views too. So it's kind of a perfect trifecta. As far as fishing these lakes go, you know, tactics wise, you can kind of run the gamut on it. You can go as simple as a little, you know, streamer, a little woolly bugger and strip that. Dry fly action can be phenomenal given the right time of year with a little foam beetle or an ant pattern. And then of course you can nymph as well. And, you know, you just want to look for structure in these places and look for drop offs, you know, logs and debris in the water, especially if it's one with brook trout in it. They tend to congregate towards that structure, whereas these cutthroats tend to be pretty surface oriented and kind of cruise around a little bit more. And then of course, inlets, anywhere there's water flowing into the lake would be a good place to focus your efforts. A lot of times fish will get that fresh water, they'll get bugs out of there, and they love to hold near, you know, any kind of flow coming in. So you can see here some good structure, a little island in the middle, that type of thing. Awesome stuff, nice colored up brook trout. So just a lot of fun. Some of the ones, if you guys are taking notes or, you know, curious about specific lakes, my favorite here in the area is Lake Henry. That's accessed just up Taylor Canyon through Lotus Creek Campground. And it's a little bit longer hike. It's about a 5-mile hike one way. But generally, if I'm going to do that, I'll try and get an alpine start. And you get about halfway up and you get to watch the sunrise. So it's kind of special. A lot of people too will camp below tree line and make it worth the hike. But you can do these hikes in a day. You can do a 5-mile in a day if you're up for the challenge and just get a real early start. So Henry's a great one. A couple others, if you're taking notes, would be Upper and Lower Lamphere are fabulous. Mill Lake's another really good one. And if you want a really long hike and really get away from people, Crystal Lake's another great one. So there you go. There's all the secrets I know about high alpine lake fishing. There's a pretty epic shot. You can see the big shelf there, that big drop off. So that would be a good place to target your flies there, fish cruising that drop off. And here from this angle, you can see it again, real obvious color change. Just insane scenery. There's a sunrise picture. Some clouds building in that one. And then again, little cutthroat. This lake right here is actually, I'm not going to tell you the name, but it's just off a highway. It's like a 5-minute hike. So even close to roads, there can be some good stuff. And that's what doing a little research on Google Earth can pay off for you. and you get some good wildflowers going up there. So we'll start moving down to some small streams. And we've got a lot of these in our area. This is where the list gets really long, and you get on the maps and you start doing some scouting on your maps, but there's a ton of options. And when I'm thinking small streams up here, I'm thinking, you know, the width of a single lane dirt road and smaller. This type of water is often, you know, great dry dropper water, little streamer, dry flies in the peak summer, and that type of thing. So here you see Matt, he's fishing a beaver dam in one of these small streams, creeping up on him, keeping a low profile. And that can be super productive. All those little beaver ponds, if you ever done that, super fun. And who doesn't love to throw dries? I mean, if you like throwing dries, small water's where you ought to be, because you can do it even outside of a hatch time. Less biomass as you get up in elevation, and those fish just have to feed pretty opportunistically. So anything that floats downstream, they're going to want to gobble it up, and you can just have some excellent dry fly days. That's a royal wolf in that brook trout's mouth. That's probably one of my favorite small stream flies. Big old Hackley bushy dry flies. Stimulators are great. Humpies, hoppers, that kind of stuff. It's a bunch of fun. And there's a beautiful brook trout. You got to love that. I mean, if you catch, you know, you're catching 4 to 6 inches all day, but look at the colors, you know, I mean, it's just epic. So this is good water to bring your 2 weight on, 3 weight, that type of thing. Something that makes a small fish feel bigger. And again, we've just got a ton of this stuff. I'll rattle off a few names as I scroll through the slides here, but Upper Spring Creek above Spring Creek Res is a great one. Got a lot of beaver ponds, cutthroat, brook trout, and brown trout. Upper Seboya is really fantastic. Upper Slate near Crescent Butte, and the Upper East up above Gothic are all great. Ohio Creek's another great one. And the Taylor River way above the reservoir. You can slam up there too. You can get brook trout, browns, rainbow, cutthroat. So we really love this high alpine stuff, and we've got a trip kind of tailored specifically to this, where we meet pretty early in the morning, a little longer drive time, a little bit of hiking in, and just a longer day in general. So usually wet wading on that, but just a ton of fun. There's a pretty little brown. And those high stream fish too will usually be pretty colored up. A lot more than some of the lower elevation stuff. So just a good rich diet for them. Everything they're eating is gonna color them up. There's a nice cutthroat on the dry, big PMX, great cutting. You can see the width of the river there. It's probably no more than, 20 feet, something like that. That specific fish was caught on one called Anthracite Creek, which holds a lot of cutthroats and a lot of rainbow. There's a Upper Cochetope there, fabulous small stream, gets a pretty good long season, gets good flows all year. That's a great place too, to bring a kid. I mean, somebody who's just learned to fly fish, or a little guy, get them out there and just throw a single dry. It's a great place to learn casting. It's not intimidating wading. You can wet wade. You don't need a lot of gear, just a rod and a dry fly and a 7.5 foot leader, and you're good to go. And there's another one, Upper Cochetope. I bet he's fishing probably a 2 weight there based on the bend in his rod, or he's snagged on bottom. That's a pretty good size brown for the size of creek right there. So you can get bigger fish in some of these streams too. And usually the nice thing about the smaller water is the bigger fish are going to be in the pretty obvious spots. Those fish compete for the prime lives, and they're not going to leave those spots. So, look for those plunge pools. You can see upstream in that photo, probably where she hooked that fish up in that plunge pool and fought it down. But it kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of it on the small rivers. And again, great place to learn how to read water and learn how to get good drifts and stuff like that. You're not showing up and wondering where the fish are. There's another little brown jumper. Now that creek there, this is one called Pie Plant Creek, which is up in Taylor Park. And it's about a sidewalk width in a lot of spots, and it's just packed with brook trout. Big old parachute Adams, easy fly selection. And there's a good look at the type of road you might have coming into some of these spots. A lot of these high country streams, you don't need a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Even you can drive right on up and hop in the river. And if you want to get more adventurous, there's places that you can 4-wheel to and really get back out away from everybody. There's a cool little plunge pool. And again, the beaver ponds and the little log jams, you sneak up behind that, throw some dries. That's just a ton of fun. All right. So we'll move down into free stones now, kind of working our way down the drainage. We've got a lot of free stones, and I kind of think of, this next segment as the river's getting a little bigger as they're coming down towards the main drainages. But our notable freestones here would be the East River, which again comes out of Crested Butte and joins the Taylor here in Almont. We've got Saboya, which is a great freestone. Thing's a bug factory down near Powderhorn. Excellent hatches. We've got Ohio Creek, which is a pretty cool little freestone. We've got Tamichi Creek. If you've ever driven into Gunnison on Highway 50 over Monarch Pass, you've been alongside Tamichi Creek, and that holds a lot of big fish too. So we've got a good selection of freestones, and again, a lot of these freestones are up higher like this. You can get some excellent scenery, and this is actually the Taylor as it feeds into Taylor Reservoir, so upstream of the inlet. So incredible views, and boy, those inlets can fish really good. A lot of fish stack up into the creek to spawn or eat or just get good cold oxygenated water. So anytime you have an inlet going into a lake or reservoir, that's a good place to fish. There's kind of a cool drone shot of a rainbow, and she's pretty stoked. That guide's name is Evan Hammonds. He's one of our really great young guides and just super passionate. This picture is of Saboya Creek down near Powderhorn. We've got a few leases that we fish, and one of them's down on Saboya. It's actually where this was taken. But you can just see the nice long riffles, and you get in there, and from now basically through the end of July, you get some great caddis hatches, stone flies. We even get salmon flies there. So you can throw big foamy dries and double dries if you want all day. And I've hiking through the willows there. I've found some antlers, which is kind of cool too. So you get a good day of fishing and a little shed hunting accidentally too. So it's kind of fun. There's a cool Saboya River brown trout, well fed. Thing's probably just gorging himself on big stone flies. And there's another awesome brown. Looks like she probably caught those two back to back. All right, so we'll keep moving down in the tailwaters, and I'll talk a little bit about the Taylor, which you guys are probably kind of familiar with, but I'll talk about a couple of the others that are lesser known as well. And and can be really fun. And a lot of you on the call are probably pretty familiar with tailwater fishing as it pertains to the South Platte, and technical style fishing with a lot of small flies and light tippets and stuff like that. But this is a neat area. Some of our tailwaters are not like that. So we do have the Taylor that can fish that way, but we've got some other ones where you can fish more normal flies, some bigger stuff, good dry fly fishing, bigger flies that you can actually see and you don't have to fish on 5 or 6X. So that's kind of nice. There's a shot of the Taylor. That's Taylor Canyon. That's probably in, maybe January, something like that. So a lot of the Taylor in the canyon will freeze over in the wintertime. The top few miles will stay pretty clear of ice. So this is probably midway through the canyon as it's getting into the depths of winter. But beautiful river. And if you haven't been to the Taylor, outside of the catch and release section, we call it the CNR, which is the tail race just downstream of Taylor Reservoir. Outside of that, we've actually got a lot of public water in the canyon. We've got about 10 miles of public water. So even though the Taylor below the dam can get kind of busy, you can find a lot of solitude in the canyon and get long swaths of water to yourself. And a lot of that canyon fishing is probably similar to some sections on the South Platte where you get a lot of great pocket water, great dry dropper water in the summer. And for those of you who like to Euro nymph or tightline nymph, it's really good for that too. It's actually, in my opinion, the Taylor Canyon's almost made for Euro nymphing. It's got so much great pockets and areas where you need to get down to the fish quickly. And a dry dropper and nymph rig is just not going to do as well. So we do a lot of that type of thing too up here. Folks will come up and they want to up their game, Euro nymphing, and we can cater to that. So super fun. There's a Taylor, classic Taylor shot, beautiful rocks, you get nice riffles, all that kind of stuff. And hey, fish on. So I think this picture is actually taken at the catch and release. But you can see just how beautiful the river is. Clear pretty much year round. Even right now, in what's kind of our runoff period, since the Taylor is a tailwater, it stays pretty clear. Even when it gets off color, we have visibility that's just fine for fishing. So never seen the Taylor muddy. And it's tributaries too that come into it stay clear. So it's kind of special. Nice rainbow. That's one of our guides, Jake Alpert. He's been with us for a long time. Really good on the Taylor, good Euro nymph guy, good Tenkara guide too. If any of you guys like Tenkara, he'll take you up to some of the small streams and do some Tenkara fishing. Yeah, good release there. So we get really good hatches on the Taylor. There's a medium brown stone there. We get a lot of them in the canyon. Actually, I was just walking my dog up the river right before this meeting and walked him down and saw a bunch of these shucks on the rocks right now. So we're getting into big time stone season, caddis, and those will go through July. And then we'll get PMDs and drakes starting here at the end of the month, green drakes. And then we'll get a slate drake hatch later in the season. And then of course you can have midges all year long, and good blue wings as well. So it's pretty buggy, especially up at the CNR. You get pretty consistent hatches almost every day up there, even in the winter. But downstream in the canyon in the summertime, once the water has a chance to warm up a little bit, we get some really good hatches. So that is the one thing that's kind of unique about the Taylor is how cold it is. It's probably one of the coldest tailwaters in the state. So if you pull up the river gauge here in Almont on the Taylor right now, you'll probably see that the hottest it's getting here in Almont's probably 55 right now. So stays pretty cold. The fish can be finicky for sure because of that. That's a reason that a lot of people come into our shop, is because they're frustrated on the Taylor. So that's where we can help out. But it's a finicky river, and it's actually pretty tricky to wade in the canyon too. But stays cold. So that's the reason why, we're just now starting to get caddis and stones on the lower Taylor, where a lot of rivers in the state have had that going on for, maybe a month now. So it just stays really cold, but we're lucky to have that because that cold water feeds right into the Gunnison and keeps the Gunnison cold all year too and fishable. So a lot of times late summer, where a lot of rivers throughout the West are having hoot owl closures and high water temps in the 70s and stuff, we're still good to go here and fish all day. So we're pretty lucky to have the cold water of the Taylor feeding down into the Gunnison. There's a big green drake from the Taylor. That's such a fun hatch. You can throw, size 10 dry fly all day, just a single dry when it's really on, and catch a lot of fish. And we get some cutthroats too. It's a Snake River cutthroat. We have some of those in the Taylor. It is predominantly a brown trout fishery, probably about 80% browns through the canyon. The catch and release section up below the dam, which, by the way, is pretty much like a whole different river than the canyon. I kind of think of them as two different fisheries altogether. But up there at the CNR, you got probably flip-flop. It's probably 70% rainbows up there. But down through the canyon in that pocket water and stuff, it's mostly browns. But occasionally we'll run into specimens like this one. We'll get some cutthroats and cut bows too. But it's a brown trout fishery by and large, kind of similar to the Arkansas River around Buena Vista and Salida. Those browns, they like their pockets, they like their individualized feeding lie, whereas rainbows like rivers like the Gunnison, for instance, that has a lot more long, deep riffles and runs, and they tend to be more congregational. So if you're fishing and you're catching rainbows, there's probably going to be more there, whereas those browns tend to kind of like their own zone. And there's kind of a classic catch and release fish, CNR fish. I just make the joke, the CNR stands for cast and repeat, because a lot of these big fish are pretty well educated up there. And the good thing that you have going for yourself up at the CNR is that the fish have to eat a lot because they're big. And so big fish has to eat a ton of bugs and shrimp all day to maintain its weight and size. And particularly around the change in seasons. So of course we know rainbows and cutthroat spawn in the spring. And so of course I don't advocate fishing for spawning fish, but you can use that to your advantage by targeting pre-spawn and post-spawn fish when they have a desire to feed really heavily to get that energy to spawn. So this fish here was probably caught in May. I think that was probably 2018 because there's no snow anywhere. So it's probably a dry year. But March is generally a good pre-spawn time to come up and fish a Taylor. It can be really cold. I had a client come up for a few days this year to hunt big fish up there in March. And I don't think the temperature ever hit 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It was below 10 the whole time. So it was definitely a kind of a rough hunt, but he found a couple good ones. So that kind of helps warm you up. But the nice thing is that section up there, you're pretty close to your vehicle, so you can warm up and, bring your flask or whatever you want to do, bring some hot soup and then get back at it. So, but that's a classic big rainbow up there. And they'll get up to 10 pounds plus every year. Our guides will catch a few 10 pounders, and it's just pretty amazing. The reason the fish get so big up there is because of the mysis shrimp. So if you fish the blue or the frying pan, similar deal. Back in the 60s when they were managing the reservoirs to get big lake trout, They introduced mysis shrimp, and they get spit out the bottom of the dam and just create some monstrous fish. So I'll shift from the Taylor a little bit. That's kind of the famous one that we're known for. But this brown here was actually caught on Spring Creek, which is another tailwater. And Spring Creek's a tributary of the Gunnison, or of the Taylor. And it comes into the Taylor about 7 miles upstream of us here in Almont. We got a lot of public water on Spring Creek, probably 12 miles or so before the reservoir. And it's actually a pretty cool little tailwater, and it has some big fish in it. A buddy of mine, he works for CPW, and they were doing a shocking survey on Spring Creek a couple years ago, and they actually shocked an 8-pound brown out of there. So it's got some big fish, got a lot of small fish too, though. It's got really healthy fish density, but it's great dry dropper water, great dry fly fishery, and it's one that's worth checking out for sure. It's got about 7-8 miles of canyon section that kind of look like this photo. And then it's got a few miles up in a meadow section too. That's really classic meandering kind of meadow. That's nothing in your back cast and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun. Before I move on to the Gunny, I do want to touch on a couple of our other tailwaters. So one that's not very well known about, but I'll let you guys in on it, is actually right downstream of Blue Mesa Reservoir on the Gunnison. It feeds into Morrow Point Reservoir, and there's a little section of the Gunnison there that we call Pine Creek, and it is a tailwater. Blue Mesa Dam is a hydroelectric dam, so it does fluctuate and flow quite a bit. But you can find the gauges if you just do a Google search for Blue Mesa water level or reservoir level. You can find a stream gauge for that one. And, about 500 CFS is pretty nice to fish down there. So it's a bigger river, but it's got huge fish in there. And that is one of the tailwaters where you can fish 3X tippet, big San Juan worm, or big stonefly pattern, or scuds, and do really well. So it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit challenging to bring those big fish in when you hook them, because you got 500 plus CFS pulling against you. But it's a great challenge. And again, it's just not really very well known about. It's kind of off the beaten path outside of Gunnison. You got to drive. Checking out though, if you like seeing new tailwaters, and there are some monster rainbows and browns down there. And another cool tailwater that I'll tell you guys about real quick is called Archuleta Creek, and that is just downstream of Dome Lakes up the Cochito. And it's a pretty small section of Archuleta, but it's really fishy, and that's one of the smaller tailwater options. And what's nice about it is the flows stay pretty consistent there year round. So the creek's probably a little bit more than sidewalk width. It's tiny, but there's a bunch of brown trout in there. And if you like just throwing a single dry, it's worth checking out. So we'll talk a little bit about the Gunny here. The Gunnison is the main river that we float. And right now is like prime time to be here floating. So if you guys don't have anything going on this weekend, you should probably come up on the Gunnison and throw some caddis with us, because it's just on fire right now. Fishing really good. But like I said, it starts here in Almont, and the section we float goes down to Blue Mesa, which is about 20 miles of river. Breaks out into a few different floatable sections. One of the nice things that we have going for us here is we've got 2 private boat ramps on the Gunnison. One of them is actually right here at the resort. So a lot of our float trips just start right there, and you're not having to deal with, other people at the ramps and stuff, at the public ramps. And then the other ramp is in between Almont and Gunnison. It's about 5 miles downstream of us. So the nice thing about that, obviously getting away from the crowds a little bit, but it puts you in a different time slot. So, when all these other boats are out there putting in at the same time at these public ramps. We're ahead of some guys and far enough behind other guys that a lot of times you don't see other boats while you're out there. So just really nice to have that. And then there's a handful of other public ramps too that we obviously utilize. And I leave the specific section that our guides float up to them, since they're out there all the time and they know where the hatches are and what's fishing best. I kind of leave whatever they do up to them. So there's a cool rainbow. And good wade fishing on the Gunny too. Prime time to float is, usually mid-June, right about now, through into August. And some years we can float the Gunnison all the way through September. But a drier year like this one, we'll probably float through August and then we'll be wade fishing it. But it's really fantastic wade fishing, especially at those lower flows when you can get around a little bit better. There's even some spots where you can cross. You get down to some of the stuff west of town around Neversink and Cooper's Ranch. The river has a lot of there, and it kind of splits up into 2, 3, 4 different smaller rivers in a way, and it makes it a lot more approachable for wade anglers. So there's some great opportunities for the wade fishermen too down there. Nice long runs like you see in this photo here. Great riffles, stuff like that. So not just for floating. And there's a good rainbow. That's probably the only picture of me in this whole slideshow. But good early season rainbow out of the Gunny. And then the fall colors are pretty awesome too. So last week of September, third week of September, something like that. And then a lot of you guys have probably heard about the kokanee salmon run. So those kokanee come out of Blue Mesa, run upstream to the East River, and they'll hang a left up the east and go back to the hatchery where they started. So that's kind of fun too. If you never fished for them, they do fight pretty hard. And a lot of times people are, ask, they think we're snagging them, but we're not snagging them. They will eat a fly pretty readily, especially in the beginning of the run. So late August, early September, usually lower water years like this, those kokanee will start running late August, sometimes as early as mid-August. And then usually the run's kind of peaking around mid-September with the most fish in the river. And then it's kind of dwindling by the time we get into October. When people call and ask about the salmon, I just always have to give them a disclaimer that we don't know what the run's going to be. So sometimes it's not as good. Our last real big run was probably 2017, and it was just insane. We have a pool here on the Taylor right at our boathouse where our boat ramp is. And the peak of the run in 2017, there was probably like 600-800 salmon in there or more. So it was pretty special. But the other cool thing about the kokanee run is that there's a kokanee here on this slide for you guys to see, is that they add a lot of biomass to the river. So obviously they're on a spawning run, and the females will, dig their beds and lay eggs and everything like that. And a lot of the trout key in onto those eggs. So it's like a mini Alaska. I mean, you can have really good egg fishing here in September for browns and rainbows. And the other thing is a lot of these kokanee are just going to die along the way. So, they spawn, they get exhausted or whatever. It's the last stage of their life. And when they die, they add a lot of biomass to the river that the bugs eat and the fish eat. And so it just contributes to a pretty rich, kind of ecosystem all around. So kind of cool, really fun to fish for them. You can get into big numbers and they pull really hard. But even outside of just catching the salmon, the trout fishing gets better as a result of the run. So it's kind of fun. And they're kind of cool looking. They're kind of like dinosaur fish. So that one there is probably a male, and those males get that really pumpkin orange tail, which is kind of cool. There's another one there, another male, and they'll develop that gnarly hook jaw. They look pretty prehistoric, but they'll eat flies. They'll eat a San Juan worm. They'll eat a red copper john. We just fish attractors for them, mainly eggs, all that kind of stuff. And they'll eat small stuff too. You'll be fishing for trout behind them with a little RS2 or something, and the salmon will eat that. So sometimes they surprise you. And then if you look at this picture, you can see the bend in this woman's rod. And I know this one isn't snagged on bottom. This is on a salmon. So kind of cool. They do pull really hard, and she's probably fishing a 6-weight there. So they'll bend your 6-weight pretty dang good, which is a lot of fun. There's a nice colorful one. They get that brick red. That's probably right in the peak of the run based on the color, probably mid-September, second, third week of September. And you get the good fall colors too. So that's a great time to fish the gunny. And there's just a cool shot of drift boat going down the gunny. In town, we're lucky to have a nice section of public water. It's about 2 miles long, called Van Tile, and you float along these cliffs, and it's just epic scenery, and it's great. You can anchor, you can get out, fish all these runs, and we're super lucky to have that big swath of public land right in town. So I always tell people, like, the Gunnison, Upper Gunnison town stretch is like the prettiest town stretch you'll ever do, because you don't even hardly see any houses or anything. It's just kind of flows around the outside of town, and you're looking at this a good portion of the float. So it's pretty cool. And then in this picture, it's a drift boat, and on this river, it's about split. Some of the guides use drift boats, and some of them use rafts with fishing frames. So you can run either on this stretch of river. If any of you guys have your own boat and you're thinking about coming up, it's a pretty friendly river for boaters. Most of the sections you can do in your hard boat. There's one section just downstream of town that has a rapid in it. And that's the only section that you probably want to avoid in your hard boat unless you're real confident. The guides will do it, but sometimes boaters on their own will have little issues with that one. But by and large, it's a very friendly river, and even just for floating too, if you're not fishing, you want to just take a ducky down or something like that. It's real mellow and great scenery, and so it's kind of good for everybody. There's one of the rafts with the full fishing frames, so you kind of get an idea of the size of the gunny. It's a medium-sized river. It's if you've ever been on the Upper Colorado around Kremling, it's a good bit smaller than that. But the character of the river is pretty similar. A lot of riffles and runs, and great stonefly life, great caddis hatches. Again, green drakes, PMDs, blue wings, slate drakes, tricos. Get a lot of really good tricos in August. That can be some of the best nymphing of the year, actually, is in August. And fish are eating a size 22 little thread fly. But that's why you hire a guide, so you don't have to tie that on. There's a good Gunny River brown. So just a beautiful river. Again, you're floating through these cottonwoods and floating through a lot of private ranches. The Upper Gunnison in that 20 miles, probably is about 6 miles of public. So there again, that's one advantage to doing a float, is you get to fish through all those ranches that don't get any wading pressure, and you get a lot of that kind of less pressured water. So it's pretty fun. All right. I'll go into still waters here as we're kind of getting down to the bottom of the drainage. So we've got a handful of good reservoirs in the area. We've got Blue Mesa, which is the big one at the bottom of our valley. It's about 20 miles long. It's actually the biggest reservoir in Colorado. And it's got a lot of Mackinaw like this one you see here, big lake trout. If you guys like that type of fishing, There are some really good outfitters in our valley that kind of specialize with power boats and stuff for big Mackinac, or they'll fish for kokanee salmon down there. But it's definitely a trophy fishery. This fish isn't necessarily a trophy, but still super fun. And this one's actually taken up at Taylor Park Reservoir. So that's about 20 miles upstream of us on the Taylor. And it's about a quarter of the size of Blue Mesa. So still a big lake, but not massive like Blue. But it's got big Lakers in it. It's got northern pike up there that you can target with a fly. And lots of rainbows and browns, of course, as well. And then if you guys like ice fishing, there's really good ice fishing too, obviously, both on Taylor, Blue Mesa, Dome Lakes is fun. So there's a lot of options there too. And our guides like it because it's just, a lot of people have heard about the Gunnison being one of the colder places in the wintertime, which can be true. And if you've never been ice fishing and you think it's like the coldest thing you could ever do, it's not. Because a lot of times you're wearing so many layers and you're pulling your sled out there with all your gear, and you might even set up a hut with a heater in it and have your flask or your hot tomato soup. So it's actually pretty comfortable. I get a lot more cold in the summertime when I'm wet wading because I'm being silly and I think I'm a tough guy, and I'm wet wading in the Taylor that's 50 degrees. But ice fishing is pretty comfy. I'll break a sweat out there a lot. So it's just kind of fun. It just adds to the diversity of fishery. And our guides like Matt here like to get out and play around in the wintertime when the rivers are kind of froze over for the most part. There's a little better lake trout there, big old belly on it. It's pretty cool scenery too. I mean, look behind them, you get the West Elk Wilderness in the background down on Blue Mesa. And that's a pretty good laker, and they get a lot bigger even, but he's pretty excited. So guys, that's kind of the quick and dirty overview of our drainage. Again, I'm happy to take specific questions if you have those on our area. I didn't want to go too in depth on any one thing, but just kind of showcase how diverse it is up here. And, like I said, especially if, you just want to beat the crowds, get out of South Platte a little bit and come get some water to yourself. It's a pretty special place. I kind of liken it, for those of you who've traveled up to Montana and been in that Madison Valley, it's kind of similar. It's like a Madison Valley, but everything's a little bit closer. You don't have to drive an hour to get to the next river. It's all a little bit more compact and near you. So our info there is on the right-hand side. If you guys want to reach out, definitely feel free. And I will also type my personal email into the chat too. And definitely feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have. I'm happy to be of help there. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to you guys, Brian, George, and I'll open up my chat here and see if any questions rolled in.
Yeah, Patrick, there's a question from David. He asks, when's the best time of year to fish the East River?
Yeah, good question, David. Fishable season, even though it is a freestone, it still stays pretty cold year round because it's flowing out of some high mountains up behind Mount Crested Butte. So this year it's going to get skinny, but right about now or July 1, depending on the snowpack, mid-June to July 1 is a great time to hit it if you want to get some good hatches. So caddis, stones, and drakes and PMDs, basically mid-June through mid-July would be the window for that. If you look at the stream gauge on the east at Almont, Today it's about 600 CFS, and that's a little high for wade fishing. What I would probably look for is about 400 CFS or lower. And usually it gets down, its winter flow is right under 100. So winter flow might be 80 CFS on the east. And I mean, even in late fall, the east can fish really well, just fishing the riffles and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty much good all summer. But if I had to pick, I'd probably try and hit it around July 1 to get the best hatches, dry fly fishing, that type of thing. Also, if you want to fish salmon on the east, there's a couple public miles at the Roy and Judy Fish Hatchery, and they actually have a diversion to divert the salmon back into their raceways there. But on the years that we get a really big salmon run, those fish can get past that diversion. So it's not a high jump for them at all. So if it's a big run, you can have really good salmon fishing on the east too. And I'd probably try and hit that around mid-September. But it's a smaller river than the Gunnison. So when they pool up in there, you can just whale on them. So it's pretty fun. All right, I see another question here from Randall Spears. Best remote backpacking spots with good fishing. Yeah, that's a good question. I really like the Upper Taylor area. You've got the Taylor River there, and that goes way back up into the valley. And like I said, you can get brooks and stuff up there. But what you want to look for on the map, and do a little research on Google Earth or whatever, is the feeder creeks into the Upper Taylor. So Pie Plant Creek, Italian Creek, Rosebud Creek, Texas Creek way up high, Willow Creek way up high. All that kind of stuff is really good for kind of remote camping experience, and some good small stream fishing. So that's probably my favorite area, just because there's a pretty high density of small streams up there to choose from. But there again, some of the others I mentioned too can be really good and have good public land to camp on. So Upper Seboia is a great one. And Upper Ohio Creek has some stuff too. So, I mean, really, just look at your maps and look for public land, look for Forest Service land where you can camp dispersed. And pretty much, I mean, as long as the creek's not too steep and have too much gradient, it's going to have fish in it. So. All right. Well, any other questions from anybody? And like I said, I'm going to type my email into the chat here. And if you guys want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to help you out, and really appreciate getting to present for you guys. And it's a great group you got. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. It's Brian. That was great. I just had a question for you. I'm kind of curious how far out you guys are booked in terms of lodging and guiding. Is it, are you guys way out, or are you just a few weeks out, or what you thinking?
Yeah, it's pretty much day to day, Brian. So lodging can be a little tight, definitely, throughout the rest of June, July, and August. But there's openings here and there. That's a good thing about having like 40 cabins here. Plus we have RV sites and like basic lodge rooms, just like a hotel style room. So you can pretty much find something, if you're a little flexible on your dates as far as lodging. But worst case, get a room at the Best Western down in Gunnison. And as far as guide trips go, it's just day to day. We'll get big groups, book up a bunch of guides one day, and then other days we'll have 4 or 5 guides ready to go. So just depends. But it seems like these days a lot of people book pretty last minute for stuff. So if you're ahead of the game and a few weeks out, we can usually get you in.
Okay.